All right, we're recording.
Awesome.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Glad
It's a
you're here,
pleasure
man.
to have you.
So Ben and I have known each other now for, I guess, like 13 years.
Yeah, at least.
We've at least. We've had many business. I guess we've never actually owned the same business, but we've done parallel businesses
Side by
at
side,
times.
yeah.
We've had many a business brainstorm. We used to be roommates for a while on the first farm that Jill and I were running. And yeah, now so I'll introduce you, Ben, for those listening. So Ben owns a dairy just north of us here in Middlebrook, Virginia. It's called Cream Brook Farm. They're a raw milk dairy, so they specialize in raw milk, unpasteurized, unhomogenized, best of the best Jersey cow raw milk. And they ship all over the Commonwealth of Virginia to herdshare members. Yep. And Ben has grown that business tremendously, which we'll get to hear more about today. And more than anything, Ben's been a dear friend. I mean, I know for our various business ideas and ups and downs, and it's been wonderful to have you as a point of reference. Hey Ben, here's where I'm at. What do you think? You know, with different problems to solve over the years, and certainly different victories that we've had and got to share together. So anyway, super stoked to have you on.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome.
Can I add one thing about Ben that I think is phenomenal that everybody should know about? Ben is a dairy farmer and getting his private pilot's license.
In the process, yes.
So you are soon to join an elite and small community of dairy farming pilots, which I think is the coolest thing.
I still have a long ways to go, but yes, I'm in the process.
You're well on the way.
Your risk tolerance is like clearly
That says a lot
Very
about
high,
you.
yeah.
yeah.
A lot higher than my wife is comfortable with.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great.
Oh my gosh. Awesome. So Ben, tell us about, could you tell us a little bit about what is raw milk? What's the difference between raw milk and the milk you get at the grocery store?
Yeah.
What's better about it? What do you need to know? What could be the risks if somebody's thinking about sourcing raw milk where they live? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so raw milk is basically milk that has not been pasteurized. So it comes straight from the cow. On our particular farm, we milk it straight from the cow. It goes through a filtration and chilling system, goes into a stainless steel system. Everything's stainless steel, food grade, inspectable if that was the case in Virginia. And then it stays cold through the bottling process. We'll bottle in jugs, kind of like what we have in front of us here. And then we have a cold chain process all the way through to the customer's delivery. With raw milk, the biggest difference obviously is that it's not pasteurized, which is a two-edged sword, let's put it that way. The good side of it is because it's unprocessed on heat, it's a living food. So it has almost... I was just listening to a podcast the other day about raw milk specifically, where they're getting in the weeds on like the science of it. But basically, like raw milk has like 700 different species of bacteria in it. And people be like, ooh, bacteria. Like, why would I want bacteria in my milk? Well, the thing you have to keep in mind is, this sounds weird, but we are not a single cell organism. We like to think of ourselves as like Ben. I'm just Ben or Buddy or Daniel. But the truth is, like, we're actually a host for billions and billions of living bacteria, enzymes, proteins, all these little different things within us. And if we're not feeding those communities within us properly, our overall health suffers. Mm-hmm. So the beauty of raw milk is it's a super nourishing food that's feeding your gut biome, feeding your living system within you. And there's a lot of power to that. And there's more and more science coming out all the time about the benefits of like feeding your gut health, all those good things. And raw milk is
that's
amazing.
like a trending thing, taking probiotics and eating your yogurt. That's kind of the conventional thing to do.
And the sad thing is, like, the probiotics you take off the shelf or you get in a yogurt are like a teeny tiny % of what's available in like a raw milk, a raw kefir, a raw cheese, any kind of living product, if you want to put it that way. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other side of the coin, you do have to be extremely responsible how you produce it, because raw milk, if done poorly, can have lots of bugs you don't want in it. And that's why raw milk kind of got stigmatized over the last 100 years. Pasteurization came in. There was this real push against raw milk because of sanitation, milk quality issues in the early 1900s up to the 1920s. There was a big push to clean up milk because it was associated with a lot, specifically child-related diseases. So there was a big push to kind of like clean it up, quote unquote, through pasteurization. There was also another push side by side with it to clean up raw milk itself and have it as its own clean product. And there was actually a dairy in New Jersey that operated up into the 1970s that was milking over, I think, 1,600 cows purely for raw milk, shipping in New York City, into Philadelphia, down to Baltimore. It was called the Walker Gordon Laboratory Farm. They might be milking more than 1,600 cows, but it was for that time period. It was huge. It was a ton of cows.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There was Altadena in California that was doing the same thing. It was called certified milk. They didn't call it raw milk. They called it certified milk. But the industry kind of won over with the pasteurization. Walker Gordon went out of business. Altadena went out in the mid 90s. And then there's kind of been a rebirth of the raw milk industry starting in the late 90s with Raw Farm, the McAfee's out in California, and then kind of leading up to lots of other operations like us now. But we're also members of the Raw Milk Institute, which is a global organization that's dedicated to safety within raw milk, looking at the health benefits, but also like what can we do as producers to make the milk as clean and healthy as possible. That's been a massive resource for us. So we're very active participants within the RAMI Institute, Raw Milk Institute. We just call it RAMI for short. We're big participants in that. There's still a lot to learn, but we are blown away by the research we have access to and the stuff we see on a regular basis. So it's a very tip of the spear industry right now, which is kind of where I tend to dwell anyway. So yeah, that's kind of the quick synopsis of raw milk if you want to look at it that way.
Really Ben, could you give us just a brief snapshot of where you're at now with your family? What does the operation look like? And then we'll travel back, but give us a snapshot.
So we're located in Middlebrook, Virginia, which is roughly 45 minutes north of Buddy, about 20 minutes north of Daniel's place. We're currently milking just under 90 cows. We're serving around 2,300 families every week with fresh raw milk throughout the Commonwealth, and some add-on fun products like the chocolate milk and kefir and some other things, cream.
Speaking of.
And so we've got a lovely, I think we have like 7 full-time employees right now that are working for us. We have a really, really top-notch crew, which we're very thankful for. My wife and I have 4 boys, so the place is very loud and rambunctious. We would like to remodel our home, but we've kind of agreed that until they're past the destructive phase, there's not much of a point. So the house at times feels very lived in, but it's fun. But like last night, we had a night where it was just Chris and I in the house, and we're like, it's crazy how quiet it is when it's just us.
Yeah.
No kids, no employees. It's becoming really, really rare that happens. But yeah, so we're very, very busy, but also very thankful to be in the position we're in now to serve that many families, but also have the opportunity to serve our employees. And you kind of build a team and a culture around what we're trying to do as a business in a dairy.
And how many acres are you farming right now?
Cream Brook is 240 acres. A little bit more. When you take the buildings out, it's about 240 acres of pasture. Everything's grass-fed. We don't have a pack barn. We don't have free stalls. The cows live outside 365 days a year, which we can get away with that in the climate here we have in the Shenandoah Valley. You still have some tough times in the winter and the summer with heat and snow and all that other stuff. It's a little bit of a challenge to operate that way, but we want the cows outside. We feel like it's a big part of making our milk what it is. And also, from honestly a profitability standpoint, it's part of it too.
Yeah.
So it has its challenges at times, but we feed the cows as much grass as we possibly can. That's our goal, is to get them to eat grass. That's what makes the milk taste so good. We only milk Jerseys. We love the little brown girls. They can be Jerseys can be very ornery at times, so they definitely have their annoying points, but they're cute and they're mostly enjoyable to work
and
with.
Don't they have a really high cream content?
Yep. High components, butterfat, protein, other solids, all those other things. So
it's an ideal. Would you say it's an ideal breed for?
Yes. Well, it's ideal from like
dairy.
Yeah. Number one, the flavor is incredible. Number two, they're very hardy cows and they're smaller. They only weigh about 800 to 1,000 pounds versus a Holstein, which is like 1,500. So for us, especially being an outdoor operation, their impact on the land is minimal. minus, a black and white dinosaur that just kind of digs
What's
in
a
the ground.
Holstein, like 1,800, 1,500?
Well, 15-ish. You can get them in the 1,800 pounds, but like 15 is probably more like standard Holstein size, at least American Holstein.
Gotcha, yeah.
Where the Jerseys, they're kind of a low impact. They're kind of like a Honda versus a Suburban. Holstein Suburban, it's cool, it's big, can haul a lot of stuff, but the mileage is awful.
Yeah, yeah.
Jerseys are Hondas, less fuel, but also less bang. So, but you have to outweigh the pros and the cons.
Yeah, as a beef guy, I know very little about dairy cows in terms of actually raising them. But one thing, generally speaking, I know is they're generally a little bit more, maybe sensitive is not the right word, but they need a little bit more care than your average beef cow in terms of like feed quality. If you want really good
here's
milk,
the best comparison
on
nutrition. Beef cows are like middle-aged male office workers. Like the nutritional requirements are very low, and you don't have to feed them a whole lot to put on body fat. I mean, let's be honest, guys, we're middle-aged men now.
I was going to say,
so
sounds hauntingly familiar.
Yeah. Dairy cows are like a CrossFit athlete. Like they're in there clanging and banging every day. They're moving weight. They're making stuff happen. And like their nutritional requirements are really high. And their performance is really high. And they're going to lift weights every single day of the week. And like if you get a glitch or hiccup in their nutrition, it immediately shows up in the performance.
Yeah.
So, and that's been a hard lesson to learn coming from more of a beef background. Originally, you're thinking like, oh, we'll just put them on grass and that'll be cool. To realizing like, oh, they actually have considerably higher nutrient requirements than a beef cow does.
Yeah. And with milking every day, like with our herd, we don't do this often, but sometimes, whether it be logistical or weather related, we just have to make a decision where it's like, you know what, let's leave them an extra half day in that spot. It's okay.
Yeah.
With the dairy cows, I imagine, because you're milking every day, you're gonna pay whatever price for any even minor stress. Every little half day.
With beef cows, unless you're running over a scale every day, you don't really ever see how well or poorly you're doing until you get to the end of the year and you're like, man, they only weigh XYZ.
Right.
Or, they weigh XYZ.
Yeah.
With a dairy cow, you get a report card twice a day on how well you did or didn't do with managing stress, nutrition, all those kind of things. So it's a little bit unfair because you have so much more data with the dairy than you do with a beef herd. So, and I think that's where a lot of beef guys kind of miss out. It's like, unless you're paying super close attention, a month goes by and you're like, oh, these things didn't gain any weight. Well,
yeah.
Are you buying in stock? Do you have a breeding program?
both.
Okay.
Our goal is to completely grow all of our replacements, but we're in such a rapid growth curve that like we have to buy cows. And once again, that's another reason why we kind of go with the jerseys. I think they adapt easier of the our breeds to our system than like bringing in Holsteins or Swiss or something like that.
Yeah, I would say too with I've been drinking raw milk for like 15 years from various different farms, but ever since you started your farm, and they've all been really good. But in terms of consistency, that's like one of the things I tell people who've had raw milk before and are thinking about trying Cream Brook, because they'll be like, yeah, we used to love the raw milk, and then it got weird, kind of tasted like onions, when summertime came along or whatever, and it's like, yeah, well, they probably got into some wild onions or something. Yeah. Your cows, the milk consistency is unbelievably solid. And I think that's one gap that when you're talking about raw milk and the feed quality and milking every day, for the customer, like you're going to experience it in the milk, in the taste, if the feed quality is not consistent. That's something that's definitely impressed me as one of we get 4 gallons a week of this milk, and me and my son drink most of it. So I'm like one of your key testers, I think. And definitely the consistency is amazing. So I feel like I have a lot to learn from you. I love picking your brain about when I'm grazing the beef herd, hey, when are you cutting hay? Are you going to wrap this year? And getting advice on improving our feed quality here. Yeah,
not to be like holier than thou, but like the beef guys could learn a lot from the dairy guys.
Yeah, no, I've definitely experienced that.
Like the amount of time I spend on nutrition is mind-boggling at times. And for beef guys, unfortunately, it's mostly kind of just forgotten. The amount of times I've heard people say, well, this hay's crappy, but it's better than feeding snowballs.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, great, but like
keep them alive.
Keep them alive, but it's doing nothing for your quality of your beef, your gains, and that other stuff. So it's a science, and like dairy is a very unforgiving business. Like you take your eye off the ball for a few minutes and it's going to smack you upside the head. So just the level of intensity trying to like stay on top of stuff can be a bit daunting at times, to be completely, especially the raw milk side. Cause like you're looking at nutrition, you're looking at cleanliness, you're looking at cow health. You've got so many different factors.
Testing the milk every time.
We have our own labs. So we're testing each batch of milk. So we have that report card we're looking at. I always joke with the lab is like, it's not emotional. Doesn't care if I had a good day or a bad day. It's going to give me results whether I won or not. And then it's my job to take the data and then see if we need to make an adjustment on the processing side.
So Ben, can you take us to back? Let's see, when about 13 years ago, when you first started doing the dairy business.
Well, so funny thing, today is September 4th, correct? I believe
October.
Sorry, October 4th. It's been a crazy year, and time has
Ben's been on pasture for a while.
I got news for you. It's a month later than you just thought.
Yeah. Well, Chris and I were joking about this yesterday. Like, I still feel like it's August, but it's actually like October, but it's just been one of those years. So September 4th, I left home in Maryland where I grew up, moved down to Polyface Farms. It was September 4th, 2007. So however many years ago that was now. That was the beginning of my farm journey. I did not grow up farming. Did not grow up in a farming family. My grandparents had some like 1960s, 1970s styles, like hobby farms, kind of like sort of like the homesteading thing that's kind of coming in now. There was a big like push in the 60s and 70s for similar, and they were kind of both a part of that. But like they never saw farming as anything else than something to lose money for your taxes and feed yourself. So when I was in my teen years and kind of like, I think I want a farm when I grow up. My dad was like, he sat me down. He's like, look, buddy, I hate to tell you this, but like there's only two ways into farming. One is to inherit it. We know that's not going to happen. The second one's to marry into it. And I really suggest you don't do that. And I kind of mumbled under my breath something like, well, I'll find a third way, or, and that's unfortunately kind of my motto throughout most of my life. I'm always looking for that
third option.
What was can I stop right there? What was the initial appeal to farming? Because you didn't have the background.
Yeah.
What was that? What drew you to it and to Polyface?
So my grandparents loved antique equipment. They took me and my couple of younger brothers along in the summers to all these antique tractor shows. My grandfather had some antique tractors, and I was just enthralled with all things ag equipment. Did a little bit of 4-H. Never really liked the 4-H stuff, but I was enthralled with the whole equipment side. So I was like, oh, this would be so cool to do this. And like, I can remember one of my earliest memories, it was probably only 2 or 3. I have a picture of it in my bedroom sitting next to my nightstand, was riding on my grandfather's lap on his John Deere Beat, which I actually now own. It's in our barn. But that memory is like cemented in my brain. And like, that was when the bug bit me. But like from a family perspective, we didn't really have an agricultural background, didn't have a farming background. So, I went through high school, graduated, got to college because that's what every good boy's supposed to do. Was getting good grades, hated college with a passion, but that's what I was supposed to be doing. Was running out of cash. I didn't want to get a student loan, which is funny. This is the early 2000s. Looking back now, I was like, boy, how fortuitous. Like I did bite that bullet like so many other people unfortunately did. And then saw the apprenticeship opportunity at Polyface, applied for the apprenticeship, got in. The day I got accepted, I sat my parents down and told them like, because it was in between the fall and spring college semesters. I sat them down and told them, I said, guys, or not guys, mom, dad, I just quit college. Because I realized if I quit all my classes the week before, I could get all my money back. I could get a full refund.
Oh, nice.
So I quit to get my full refund. I sat them down and said, hey, I'm moving to Virginia in the fall. I'm going to, go for this farming thing. I quit my college courses so I get my cash back. I'm going back to work my summer job between now and then.
Oh my gosh.
My dad was like, okay, cool, whatever. My mom was pissed, putting it lightly.
Yeah.
Cause like that was not the plan.
Yeah.
So, persevered through that, moved down in September, had a pretty rough introduction to farming just because I was so green. I didn't know anything. But long story short, stayed there, finished the apprenticeship, ran another farm on kind of a manager level for a year, then was working for other farmers, kind of similar styles about the time I met you. And then you got married at the beginning of 2012, right?
Yeah, 2011.
2011, okay. Oh, that's right. You got married in May.
Mm-hmm.
Chris
April,
and I,
but it's okay.
April. Okay. It was like what, April 30th?
Yeah. Well, okay.
Well, maybe I'm not supposed to say what the dates are, but anyway.
Yeah.
Did you all cross paths at Polyface? Were
Yes.
Were you apprenticing?
So
at the
Ben
same
was
time?
managing a farm when I was an intern there, and Ben's wife, Kristen, and I were interns at Polyface together.
Yeah.
No way. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, but the funniest little side was Buddy and Jill were getting married. Buddy had started the farm over in Swope. He needed somebody to watch the farm for a week while they went to Jamaica or do whatever, people do in their honeymoons.
Honeymoon, baby.
And he's like, hey, Ben.
And you and I were roommates before.
We were roommates at this time.
Wedding,
yeah. And Bud's like, hey, if you watch the farm for a week, like Jill will shoot your wedding for free whenever you get married.
That was never going to happen.
Never going to happen. Like, I think my family behind my back had voted me like Bachelors of the Rapture. Like I just had zero luck with girls.
Wait, what? Bachelor to the Rapture?
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious. Bachelor.
I love that.
And so their wedding was Kristen and I's first public date. And Buddy was like, well played. Well played. So that was in the spring. We dated through, got married the following January 2012. We moved into a rundown farmhouse that had been actually used for storage for 2 to 3 years before we got into it. So it was in awful shape, but it was dirt cheap rent.
But you're contract farming for Polyface.
A little bit. This is when we started Cream Brook. We bought our first couple dairy cows, started dabbling in the dairy side pretty seriously. I always knew the dairy bug had bit me pretty early on. Like I bought my first cow the year after my apprenticeship, and I was just milking one for myself because I was trying to feel like if I'm going to make a full-time career out of agriculture, like what sector do I want to specialize in? And really like the cows. Like chickens paid the bills, but like I couldn't stand chickens. Like I raised a lot of chickens. It was fine, but it was just like not my passion. So we started dabbling with the dairy. We were there at that first farm in Swope for 2 years. Kristen's parents had been leasing a farm and doing a dairy of their own.
Over in Richmond.
King William, east of Richmond. They had started their own creamery, so they kind of coaxed us to go out there to work with them. So we folded up our operation and left Swope and moved over to King William, the farm with them. And that was a pretty pivotal, tough time for us. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed being my own boss, my own business owner, until we kind of quote unquote sold that business and then was back working with other people.
Yeah, because let me make sure I'm remembering correctly and getting the details. Before you went to Richmond to farm with Kristen's, your wife's family.
Yeah.
At their dairy, you and Kristen started your own dairy with what, like 2 or 3 cows?
I think we had 4 cows the first year and 6 cows the second year.
Yeah.
So and very, very small.
And that was the year, or that was, I guess you guys, a couple of years.
That was 12 and 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also raised some chickens.
Yep. Chickens, pigs, ducks.
Sold those through Polyface because you were kind of still close enough that you could sell under their umbrella.
Yeah.
And we got raw milk from you then. And that one thing I wanted to ask about, because I don't know if I know your story from this. You were there for the derecho.
Yes.
So what we have to know what was we call it Farmageddon.
Yeah.
I don't know what your title for it is, but how did
this
you guys
storm
survive?
has surfaced every episode of our.
I just have to. I've never heard Ben's story from this. How did you guys? How'd you experience it at your particular farm? Because it was so different locally. And then how did you make it through?
Well, it was emotionally traumatic for me because it was June, I think, when it happened. We'd been pushing hard the whole year.
And anybody who knows Ben, he's a very emotional guy. So
yeah, not really. Yeah. We had been pushing hard the whole year. And I was just exhausted. And that weekend we were supposed to go up to Maryland for my cousin's wedding. So we kind of been building up for like, we're going to get a break. We're going to get some time to dial it back. We've been pushing like really, really hard, getting things going. And then the night before we were supposed to leave, like Kristen was giving me a haircut and we were looking at this big cloud like coming over the hill going, oh, that looks interesting. And it wrecked the farm, knocked the power out. Like it was pretty, and we're a dairy, we have the milk.
Yeah.
So I had an old 8N Ford. I ended up jerry rigging the vacuum pump to that tractor so that we could still milk. We had to dump all the milk because we didn't have any cooling, but at least, because I tried hand milking 8 cows for the first day and realized that was not going to work. You can hand milk the many cows, but you got to like build up to it. You just can't like cold turkey do that. Mm-hmm. So I jerry rigged the tractor up because we didn't have power for like 4 or 5 days. I was washing all the milking equipment down at the creek just in between.
Yeah. And just were you like feeding the milk to the pigs kind of thing?
Yeah. We were doing. I forget exactly what we did
because you didn't have refrigeration.
No.
I remember. Didn't you guys have a spring that was like kind of like a chill box that you could?
Yeah, but it's not nothing like modern refrigeration.
Yeah.
But So yeah, that was really hard because like Kristen and my brother Josiah, who was working with us at that time, they went ahead and I told them like, hey, just go to Maryland and be part of the wedding. Like somebody's got to stay here and just kind of suffer through. And I have a thing for being the sacrificial lamb sometimes. So I kind of stayed there and we suffered through and got through it. But it was a big, like, we've been working towards like, oh, we're gonna have this time off. We're gonna get this break. And then it like fell through. And that's been a repeated story throughout our history of like, we'll be almost to like a major life event, a big rest period we think is coming, and then something will happen and like completely crush it. And you're back having to like hustle through. So, but yeah, we got through it. We survived. And, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting storm to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys didn't have any significant losses. That's good.
No, we didn't lose any. Unfortunately, all of our chickens were off pasture at the point in time. I had put all my shelters up against the side of a hill, so the wind didn't even get to them.
That's great.
All of our chicks were still in the brooder. So like as far as business loss, it was minimal. It was just more of a like, I was so ready for a break, and then the workload just increased with no break. And
okay, sorry, I had to ask.
Yeah.
But you sold that operation and then went and worked for Kristen's parents.
Yes. So we went there, just to be completely honest, because well, you guys know I'm an honest guy. That relationship didn't quite work out the way we hoped it to. I think Kristen's dad still was very much the man. I was kind of the young gun wanting to prove myself. We ended up clashing probably more than we should have. But after a year of that, it was like, all right, we got to go do something different because this is obviously not working. Mm-hmm. But there was a pivotal moment during that time because Kristen was pregnant with our first son, James. And one night I was just so frustrated because like we had this little business. It was like, if you even call it a business, it was a self-sufficient struggle, if you want to call it that way. But like, I really missed that. And like, I was so frustrated because we had like tried to like work with other people, partner with other farms, try to like ride other established businesses' coattails to our own success. And it was just not working, which is the low risk way. Like don't borrow money, work with other people, borrow as much assets as you can, lease things. Mm-hmm. And I was so frustrated. And we sat down one night. I was like, if we're going to do this for a career, why don't we just go all in? Why don't we actually like buy a farm? Like, let's just take on the mortgage. Let's do what we have to, because we're going to do this for 20 or 30 years. Like we're going to have nothing to show for the way we're currently, 3 years in, we had like literally nothing to show for 3 years of work. Mm-hmm. And so we got on this website. I don't know if it even still exists, called dairyrealty.com. I started looking. All of a sudden I realized like, oh, in Wisconsin and New York and Missouri, like there's very affordable farms.
Oh, I remember this phase. And you were going out there to check them out.
And we were like, this is actually attainable.
Yeah.
So that kind of set the seed for like, all right, let's go all in. Let's like throw caution in the wind, which we normally do. And
it sounds like you, Ben.
Yes. And let's just go after this. So that was a really pivotal moment for us, because before that, we kind of had been like a chip floating on the ocean without a direction. We knew we wanted to farm full time. We knew it was a career, but like we didn't really have a like, okay, this is where we're going. And from that moment on, we had this central focus of like, okay, we're working towards farm ownership. And I forgot about this. I was even forgetting about it now. We added into that, hey, for laughs and giggles, let's see if we can do it before Ben turns 30. At this point in time, I was probably 25, which sounds like preposterous. But it was like, let's put a little deadline. Let's see if we can do this before Ben turns 30. So we, after we left working with Kristen's folks, we moved up to Pennsylvania, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, to work at the Family Cow, which at that point in time probably still was the largest raw milk dairy on the East Coast. They also had chickens and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I kind of got brought on because I had chicken experience, was also interested in dairy. Was there for a year. That was a super educational year.
They're really multifaceted, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
It was a big educational, a lot of growing up for me. But I was there for a year. And then for the second year, we were working on a separate dairy that was not direct marketing, but they were strictly 100% grass-fed, shipping to a certified organic market. It was just a dairy.
Was Family Cow for you kind of like, because you had your own dairy in Swope that was just 8 cows at max, sold that, went and worked on Kristen's family's, I can't remember the name of it now.
Old Church Creamery.
Thank you. That wasn't the ideal. And then you did see the Family Cow, which was like maybe not exactly what you want to do, but it was like, whoa, okay, this is that's a huge business.
I was always drawn towards grazing. I've always wanted to graze cows on pasture. It's always been part of my like farmer DNA, if you want to put it that way. At Old Church, they had a very limited land base, so we did a lot of barn feeding. Family cow was also very similar, limited land base, so a lot of barn feeding. So I never really was like super like excited about the way the farm was being run. Not that like they were poor management practices or they weren't doing things properly.
Yeah,
but like
sure.
There was a lot more feeding and manure scraping going on than I would prefer. I like it when cows poop on pasture and I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
So, but I had a lot of work to do with the chickens there. But then that was the big attraction going. The secondary was it was strictly a dairy. I was really ready to be done with chickens. We really were able to kind of focus on that. The gentleman who owned that farm was kind of looked upon as being a business guru in that circle. So I kind of wanted to glean information from him. But the family cow and the second farm were very instrumental for me from a mindset perspective, because like they were multi-million-dollar businesses. And I always had thought of more homesteady size operations. So it was a big mind opener for like, oh, the potential is so much greater than I ever could have imagined for these businesses. It also cemented for Chris and I that we did not want to be direct marketing farmers. I wanted to focus on farming, wanted to focus on, production, working with Kristen, having a family, farming. I really did not want to get into the marketing side because like we saw there was a lot of money in it, but there's a lot of stress and other issues that come with it. So
yeah, that's a tough thing for, I think anybody thinking about farming is like, you kind of have these two routes, generally speaking. You either go production and you're selling in a commodity market that's controlled by national price averages and droughts in, South America and all kinds of international factors you have no control over. Or it's like the pendulum basically swings hard the other direction where you're direct marketing and it's all up to whatever marketing energy you can put behind it. And when it's successful, it's great. Yeah. And when it's not, you're on your own.
That could be really bad.
Yeah.
So we really did not want to go in the direct marketing direction. So we went to Wisconsin and Missouri. We looked at 2 different farms up there. Really wanted to buy the one in Wisconsin, but we didn't quite have any kind of money behind us to really make that happen, which we joke about now because my wife always complains about the cold. I'm like, you realized we almost moved to Wisconsin.
Or it's winter half the year.
Exactly.
It's our version of winter anyway in Virginia.
But I really, when we went to Wisconsin in the winter, we were looking at it because I wanted to see like, okay, how bad is bad?
Yeah.
And like, I was actually kind of attracted to it. Missouri was a little bit very interesting. I think it kind of turned us off from what we were wanting to do. But kind of an important side story when this is happening is when I left the family cow, they had a financial advisor named Ted LeBeau, who's the owner of Kitchen Table Consultants, who they'd brought in to kind of help them. The family cow had been a conventional dairy, had a lot of financial issues because of that. And we're working through that as they transition to a direct marketing farm. So they brought Ted in to kind of like financially coach them. And Ted back at that point in time was like a $300-$400 an hour like consultant, like lawyer fees. I got to work with him a little bit side by side because I was the farm manager. So I had to give like reports and stuff like that. And it made me realize like I always thought I was good with money just because I came from a very thrifty family. Almost never had any personal debt, did almost everything with cash. I just thought I was good with money because I was quote unquote thrifty. And what I realized working with Ted was like, I don't know the first thing about finance. Like I have a lot to learn. So when I left that job, I called Ted. I was like, hey, I know this is an off the wall question, but like, I want to buy my own farm. He knew that. I said, I need mentorship. Would you be willing to mentor me on these like financial things I need to know? He said, great. We'll once a week on Monday, we'll talk for 20 minutes. I'll give you your quote unquote coursework and we'll go from there.
Whoa. Did he charge you for this?
No.
Wow. That's cool.
And we talk about this a lot. He's told me multiple times, and I think this is important for younger listeners to hear, is like that relationship's now like 7 years running. And he's like, the reason I've invested so much free time and effort into you is because you actually do what I say. Not like blindly follow along, but like you take my advice, you want to learn the lessons. Like you're an interactive student. You haven't been like, oh, I'm not doing that. So from Ted, I basically got an MBA. I mean, it's not a literal MBA, but like
crash course MBA.
Crash course. Learn how to build Excel sheets, how to build budgets, how to figure cash flow, how to make rolling cash flow charts. So the whole time I'm working at these other farms, and we're going around the country. We would look at a potential farm. We'd come back. We'd build a business model for like, okay, if we were going to buy this, how would we make this thing pay for itself? So it was kind of like we had multiple different models from multiple different farms. So we're looking at like, okay, what different options do we have here? Once again, all focused on more commodity commercial production. Because coming from Polyface, you kind of get this stigma that like there's no money to be made in commercial agriculture, which once I got out and started visiting our farms, I realized that's not true. There's a lot of farms that actually do very well. It's a hard business, but you can do commercial commodity well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we were leaning on that. It's like, okay, what can we do to like build a business model? So for laughs and giggles, there was this farm in the Shenandoah Valley, not far from Polyface. I was familiar with the area. I said, hey, real estate, you'll do like comps where you look at this versus that. Like, let's look at a comp for like, if we went back to quote unquote home, Kristen's family's from Virginia, to the Middlebrook, Shenandoah, Stanton area. So went down, looked at the farm. It was the most expensive of all the farms by quite a shot. But, Virginia had the option for direct marketing. We did not want a direct market, but we knew it was in our back pocket. If things went south, that would be like our lifeline. In Wisconsin and Missouri, there wasn't really direct marketing options. So that's what really kind of piqued my interest in like, okay, I think Virginia is where we're going to go, even though the upfront cost is a lot higher. So we identified this farm. The plan was to certify organic, ship milk to Organic Valley. We started
you can buy in the grocery store there.
Yep. Yeah. Organic Valley is a national brand.
Yeah.
We thought, we started working on a business plan for this. And at this point, like, I had no idea how we're going to, and the farm's $1.8 million. Like at that point in time, we had a couple $1,000 saved up.
Yeah.
It was like, I had to say, when you're a farm manager, you get paid pittance. And we had, kid, and we were trying to pay rent and everything else. So, I kind of went to Ted, said, Ted, I know this is crazy, but like, I think this is the farm for us. Here's my reasons. He's like, okay, great. Build a business plan for it and come back to me. So I built a business plan, came back to him. He said, okay, there's this organization called Iroquois Valley. They might be a real fit for you. Let's talk to them about it. So we went to Iroquois Valley. They're an investment group out of Chicago that's specializes in investing in first generation young farmers that are regenerative, organically minded, et cetera, et cetera. So we pitched the business plan to them. They were like, nope, sorry, not for us. It was like, okay. So I went back to the drawing board and I looked at their concerns. I was like, well, actually, I think I can kind of address some of their concerns. So I went back to them a second time. I was like, hey, what if we did X, Y, Z? And it caught enough of their interest. They're like, okay, the kid seems to, doesn't take no for an answer. Let's, kind of go back and forth. Long story short, it took about 4 months of negotiating. We had to get Iroquois Valley, FSA, and a local bank, First Bank and Trust, involved. But basically, we got all three of them to agree to go in together
with me
at the helm to make the purchase of the farm.
And you're like 26.
What year is it? Are you before 30 at this point?
This is 2017. So yeah, the 30 thing I'll reference that in a minute. So we finally, and the old man who had the farm before us did not want to sell. He was really hoping to just die on the farm. That was like his wish, but his family was like twisting his arm, like, you've got to sell, you got to sell. So we came along with a good offer, and the family basically like forced him to accept a offer from us. So he was that was another struggle, is he was kind of dragging his feet on everything on his hand.
Because it was for sale. I remember
it had been for
that.
sale for like 7 years.
Yeah, but he just kept basically
stalling.
Stalling. Yeah.
And what you're describing is Cream Brook,
yes,
that we know
yes,
where you're at.
Our farm in Middlebrook. Yeah. So we convinced all these people to go in on this idea with us. We were going to start off shipping milk to Kristen's parents' creamery. They had gotten out of the dairy business, but they were still like in the processing business. We were going to ship our milk to them for the 3-year organic transition, and then fully transition over to Organic Valley and organic production.
What's that? You have to like let the fields lay fallow, or
no, it's just you can't use chemicals and prohibitive items for 3 years during that transition period.
Gotcha. Okay.
2017 May, we convinced her. May 22nd, we went in, signed to the farm. I was super excited. Kristen, I didn't realize at the time, was absolutely terrified, which is pretty common in our relationship.
Wait, she was?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we are signing our lives away. This is terrible.
Oh god.
Question real quick. You mentioned being thrifty, no debt, and took a certain amount of pride in that.
Yeah.
This knowledge base. What changed between that and then assuming a huge amount of debt?
Liability.
Was it Ted, or what led to that shift that caused you to be excited about that financial venture?
Two things. The first one is, when I moved to Virginia, I had like a couple $1,000 in my checking account and a car full of stuff. That was it. Like, and my family's not rich. When my parents pass, if I don't get a bill, I'll be very happy. Like there's no money coming. And I also realized that like in this life, not to get morbid, but like we came in with this life with nothing and we're going to leave with nothing. So why not just go all after, you know? And not because we're trying to accumulate things because you can't take it with you, but like, what do you have to lose? The second thing was my last couple of experiences working for people so ingrained in me the desire to be self-employed. Like this sounds really, really strange. And my wife was like, you are nuts. But like I slept better the first year at Cream Brook with a pile of debt and a business plan that was falling apart than I did the 2 years previously where we were debt free and I was a manager for other people. Because the stress and pressure of trying to please somebody else was way harder than to like, oh, the ship is sinking, but at least I'm at the helm.
I'm the captain.
I'm the captain. I'm Captain,
for better or for
I'm
worse.
Captain Smith. We're going to run through the iceberg and hope for the worst or hope for the best. I know it's weird, but that was for me, that was kind of really, really pivotal. Like I cannot, and even now the thought of working for somebody else terrifies me.
Right.
To the point where like it'll motivate me to do almost anything to stay within my own business. So that was kind of the answer to, I think, to your question with that. So
why not take the risk? I'd rather be at the helm and see what happens versus, like you said, if you stayed on the trajectory you're at, you'll be able to have a family and, you know, all these things,
right?
But 20, 30 years from then, how will you have left your mark? Right.
Exactly.
Versus like, let's try to leave our mark in a bigger way.
Yeah. And I think for me, there was this, how do I put it? I'd rather have died failing spectacularly than if I'm cerebral on my deathbed, be like, I wish I'd done this and I wish I had tried that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where like the flying thing.
I was going to say,
because like,
I don't know if I'm ever getting in that plane with you.
Yeah. Probably smart. I've always wanted to fly. It's like, man, if I don't start now, it will never happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, because there'll always be 1,000 reasons to not fly. But anyway, so we took the bite, we went there. The day we were signing, we were walking out and realized, oh, it's May. And in August, I turned 30. So it's 29, a little bit more than 29 and a half. And I was like, we had kind of forgotten about that whole second part of that deal. We're like, oh, wow. Like
you just made it.
We did it. That's pretty cool. So, and then the work began. It was kind of like, almost like a wedding. Like you have this big anticipation for the wedding. Everybody talks about the wedding day.
Yeah.
And then once you're married, you have to figure out every day afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like everybody, and that was a problem for us because like everybody was willing to invest in us to a degree with the farm, but nobody wanted to give us working capital because that's money that couldn't be recouped if we failed.
Mm-hmm.
So we literally started with like $10,000 in cash.
Wow.
And we'd gotten a few little side loans. I think that amounted like $40,000 or $50,000 in additional cash, but that had already been allocated for purchasing equipment and stuff we had. So we had basically almost no cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And no herd at this point.
Well, so Kristen's parents, when they quit milking, instead of dispersing their herd, had sent it off to a bunch of their friends' farms. So, and they were happy to send all the cows to us.
Awesome.
They really loved their cows. They didn't really want to sell them. So we leased the herd from them. Eventually we inherited it from them. So, I think it was like 50 cows or something like that, including heifers. And, you know, I think it was only like maybe 30 milking cows.
Something to get you going.
Yeah, something to get going. We brought a few heifers down from Pennsylvania. We got in ourselves. But we had basically no cash. And it's a longer story about how that deal worked out for us to actually make it happen. But it's such a crazy story. And like, we believe so strongly that like, there's no way this could have happened if the Lord hadn't like provided for us the deal that I maybe a little bit blindly, naively was from a position of naivete was like, you know, well, if we got in this farm, we can't fail. Like, you know, we'll figure it out.
Right.
I guess that's probably, if Ben has a motto, it's usually like, we'll figure it out. Like, I mean, I love planning. I have 5-year plans, all this stuff, but there's a large part of it that's like, we'll figure it out when we get there.
Yeah.
So long story short, within a month of starting, our business plan had completely collapsed because the 2017, for anybody who was in the dairy market back then, organic was awful. The conventional market had completely collapsed. They weren't taking on any producers. Guys were dumping milk. That was putting a pressure on Kristen's parents' creamery because everybody else was cutting prices and making things super competitive. They were also having some regulatory issues because the state, Virginia, was a little bit sticky on how they were wanting to do some of the processes. So like we had almost no income coming in, and it was like, okay, this is not good. And so, I was open and honest with Ted, like, hey, this is not
working. Yeah.
So we built a weekly cash flow sheet where we could see every week exactly how much money we were making or losing. Broke out all our bills. I still have that spreadsheet somewhere. I look at it every now and then just for like when I need a reminder of my own horror story. And this
is the first year of you guys buying that farm and trying to execute on
this.
The
is
plan.
Like September. So we closed on the farm in May. I built that cash flow sheet in September. So September was like, we're in deep doo-doo.
And what's your outlet for the milk at this point? We were shipping direct to consumer.
It's not direct to consumer. We were shipping to Kristen's parent creamery, and we had started a tiny herd share just as like, well, we have some extra milk. Maybe we can kind of like supplement. It was like 30 members. Mm-hmm. And we're delivering out the back of our family vehicle with a cooler, and we're like, this is stupid, but like we need every dollar we can get, so we might as well like
just hustling
just try this just any way we can make money. So September, the cash flow sheet was not looking good, and Ted's like, hey, you're gonna have to go talk to your investor people about this before, because we'd been paying them, so they weren't aware we were having problems. He's like, you just need to be open and honest, like, hey, this is where we're at. And so we went, sat down with our banker, sat down with the Iroquois, sat down with all of our people. We had just helped us sign this thing. And we're just open and honest, say, hey, we're having problems. Here's our problems. So we showed them our sheets. We showed them that we had a problem. We were aware what the problem was. But the thing that really was helpful that Ted told us, like, here's our problem, but here's what we're going to do about it. Like, we can see there's a little bit of this venue with this raw milk thing. The first profits look really promising. I think we're going to dig in on this and like push through with the raw milk until the commodity market kind of cleans itself up, and then we'll get back to our original plan. And 2017 was such an awful year for agriculture that Ted's advice to us, which was really true, was everybody's in a really bad spot right now. So your goal is to just suck less. Like, you don't have to be the best, just suck less than everybody else. And there's been a lot of times in our life or our career lately where I'm like, we're just going to try to suck less right now. We don't have to be the best. We just need to kind of like get by.
Yeah.
So, so that was our goal, was like, okay, we're just going to suck less. And I think the banks were pretty lenient with us because everybody else was in such a bad spot. And the fact that we came to them before they knew we had a problem. We're like, hey, we're having problems. But we also were identifying what our problem was. We weren't just like, the market sucks.
Yeah. So what do they do? Do they give you like, hey, look, we'll give you a few months?
So they're like, okay, let's give you a couple months of just interest only, help you out a little bit. We want quarterly reports, so we're going to meet with you on a quarterly basis. We want your spreadsheets. We want your P&Ls. They were always impressed with us from the beginning that like I really knew my books. And that was from what Ted had taught me, like I could put a spreadsheet together. I knew what EBITDA was. I knew banking terms, things that farmers don't usually know. So I could talk their language. I knew what they were looking for. Also, since I knew what they were looking for, I could kind of craft the presentation. Not lie.
Let me tell you the key bits you need to know.
Ted always said, you never lie, but don't be afraid to control the narrative. Because if you don't control the narrative, they're going to create a narrative. So if you come in with a narrative, they're going to probably accept it as long as you're not like telling tales.
And that's why he was like, we need to have a solution, not just come to them with the problem.
Yes, exactly. So we came in kind of with like the narrative, like, all right, we're having problems, but we know what our problems are, and here's our path forward. And they're like, okay, we'll give you a few months interest only.
And the path forward was direct consumer
to get us by until the commodity market straightened itself out.
Little did you know.
Yeah, little did we know. Long story short, for the first 2 years, we kind of struggled along with Kristen's parents' creamery, but the writing was on the wall pretty quickly that like it was not going to be a sustainable business. And the commodity market usually would have like a down year, but it was in that, what we found out later, was the beginning of like a almost 5-year downturn. So the industry was not bouncing back. We could see profit opportunity to the raw milk, but we were basically in like save our skin mode. Like, what can we do to like make this thing profitable so we can stay here long term? And I went into it with the mentality when we bought the farm, like, this is our one shot. Like, we bankrupt this, we're probably not getting a second shot. So we needed to like at all costs make this thing work. So close to our second anniversary, we had a meeting with Kristen's folks. They were like, hey, we're going to need to shut this thing down. We were fully aware. We were actually encouraging them to shut it down because it was putting a lot of stress on other family members and stuff like that. they're like, how much runway do you guys need to be until you're completely cash flow self-sufficient with raw milk? And I had ran the math and figured we need about 400 families to like break even. And at that point in time, we were at like just under 200 families. I said, well, we really need to be at 400 families to make this thing work. We're almost at 200, but I think if we work really hard, we could be at 400 pretty quickly. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to shut this thing down. So, okay, no worries. So they closed it down. It was actually a good thing because the creamery had been kind of taking a lot of Chris and I's time away trying to help them get the creamery growing. So all of a sudden, we now had all of our own time, all of our own attention to focus on Cream Brook. And we kind of got this motto between ourselves. We're like, we just want to be allergic to distraction. Like, we're not going to think about chickens. We're not going to think about beef. We're not going to think about other profit venues. We see there's a profit potential to raw milk, and we just have to get laser focused on this product line and make it happen. So, and surprisingly, once our focus was that way, we got to the 400. I forget exactly how long it took us, but we got to the 400 families fairly quickly. But when we got to the 400 families, we realized like we hadn't priced ourselves correctly. We still weren't making the profits we thought we were going to make. Had a long meeting with Ted, did a comp on other dairies pricing, and realized that we needed to raise our prices by about 20% if we wanted to make this like sustainable. And for a month, Chris and I went back and forth, like, we need to raise prices. Do we want to raise prices? Like, how are we going to do this? Like, we're going to lose people, blah, blah, blah. And finally bit the bullet and like, explained to our customers, hey, this is what we got to do. Raised our prices. I don't think we hardly lost anybody over it. Mm-hmm. Thanks to like, being transparent with them, explaining why we're doing this, all this kind of stuff. But that was another big like moment for us, to kind of make that jump. And at that point, we realized like it's raw milk or bust for us. Like, organic was not coming to save us. The family creamery was gone, and we were just going to have to dig in and make this thing work. And there was plenty of times where we lamented, like, why are we doing this? Like, we didn't want to direct market. Like, we wanted to farm. This is so much work. I mean, it's basically her and I doing almost all this at this point in time, milking the cows, bottling, delivering.
Dealing with customers. 400 different families.
Yeah, we had 2 small children at that point in time. We were working sun up to sundown, 6.5 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
No vacations, no nothing.
I remember this because I remember thinking, Jill and I would come for dinner, come have you guys up. And I remember thinking, man, Ben is crazy. This is like, I don't know how long he's going to be able to keep it up. Because you were really, it was like everything. You guys had grown a ton. Mm-hmm. And then the growing, I remember, facilitated like, well, that just means we need to work more because we have now more families to provide milk for. So it just kept sort of snowballing.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, just certainly.
Your personal philosophy, your dogged determination is remarkable.
Thank you.
How do you handle doubt as an entrepreneur? This is all you have. This is your one chance. How do you process doubt? Do you not address it, or how do you engage with it, especially during the early years?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I definitely had some doubts. And I remember one standing in front of the shop being like, we are never going to get to 400 families. Like, how is this going to happen? Because we were growing at like 15 families a month. Like, at this rate, we're going to be well underwater before we get to 400 families. Or, different things would happen with the herd or whatever. And you're like, oh, man. I mean, I never had this like sense of doom of like, oh, this is it. We're done for. But you would just hit hurdles to be like, oh man, I don't know if we're actually gonna be able to hit this goal or get to this place, or the weather's not cooperating, or this isn't working out, or whatever. I think for me, some of it's that fear of like, I don't want to go back to working for somebody else. So like, I gotta make this work. The other thing is that I have a deep sense of like loyalty, and I feel a lot of loyalty to the people who Iroquois Valley and the bank and everybody who like put money in to get us started. So like, I don't want to let them down. And then also just kind of like, I'm a little bit of a blind optimist. So even though I honestly realize the issues in front of me, I'm like, well, we can do this. We can do that. Like, we'll work through this. We work through other things. We'll be fine. That's not always healthy, but that can be my mentality at times. And we had a good support network. I mean, Ted was looking over his shoulders. I knew we were making progress. I knew it was going to be a long, hard fall, a tough battle. But I could see potential. I felt like, all right, if we just take that next step. There was a lot of times where like, and even recently where like, I don't really think much further in a week ahead. It's just like, we just got to get through this week. We just got to get through this month. We just got to get through this season. And then, while we've always had long-term plans, they're always kind of like hedged against like, okay, what happens here in the interim. So yeah, I mean, Kristen definitely is more the realist in the relationship. And there's been some times where she's, sat me down and been like, hey, I don't want to like rain on your parade, but like, I've heard this before. And like, these are our real issues. Like, what are we going to do to address them? Where are we at? Kristen never really has gotten involved with finances. Like, math is not her strong point. She kind of lets me handle that, but she still realizes like, if I say, let's not buy groceries this week.
She's like, wait, what?
Yeah. So like, how well are we doing or not doing? We're doing fine, but just not this week. So yeah, that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
That's great. Look into your mind. That's helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just kind of kept slugging through. And then 2019, we felt like, okay, we're still struggling, but we can see a path forward. Like, we started making some small investments in equipment we badly needed. Went from milking in buckets to actually having a pipeline. Bought a tractor with a front end loader, an old tractor. It was a 1962. So it was nothing like amazing, but it was a tractor with a front end loader. Then 2020 hit. Kristen had just given birth to our third son in January, and then March, COVID craziness hit. And it was kind of a little bit of a panic of like, okay, how's our distribution system will work? How are we going to run all these things? And at the same point, we just got absolutely inundated with people who were scared because of supply chain issues. Like, hey, I need milk for my baby. I need product. Like, how do we get it? And we're trying to, like, we were subbing out our distribution at that point in time. So we're trying to work out with distributors who were freaked out about potential health implications of COVID. We had stores that were freaking out.
Yep.
We're trying to stock with milk. So we literally like patch quilt put a distribution system together and just started pushing milk out. And we had laid the groundwork for 2020 to be a growth year. So we had the product, but it's just kind of like putting the final steps together, getting it to the folks. That was kind of really tricky. So 2020 was a really incredible year for us, where we had a phenomenal amount of growth. We were bringing in more money than we ever had. We also had a phenomenal amount of expense because, as you guys know, as business owners, rapid growth is rapidly expensive.
Yeah.
So we went into 2021. We decided to build a milking parlor. We started doing, I think, when did we start building that? I think it was 2021 was the year we built the milking parlor. And that was a long, long year for us. We had a big drought. The milking parlor project took 3 times as long as I thought it was going to, cost about 3 times more than I thought it was going to cost, and kind of drained us financially and also just like mentally and physically. 21, we still had a lot of growth going on, but we were kind of distracted that year with trying to get like key infrastructure in place to continue our growth. So going into 2022, Kristen was pregnant with our 4th son, Miles. And with pregnancy, she can usually just work through it. It's no big deal until like maybe the last couple of weeks. But with that pregnancy, for whatever reason, it wasn't like complications, but she was having some side effects that were forcing her on the sidelines more. And that March, I was working with a bunch of heifers down in the corral. I forget exactly what happened, whether I got tripped up or I just fell or exactly what happened, but I fell, hit my knee really hard. The initial concern was I had blown my ACL out. Fortunately, that was not the case, but I did like sprain everything you can sprain, like my ACL, PCL, meniscus, and I was in a leg cast, a knee brace. Mm-hmm. Most people don't really know about it because I kept it under my pants, but I was in a pretty stiff knee brace for most of that year, trying to like heal.
Because you had no employees to be like, all right, I got to sit this day out. It's like, nope, I'm up at dawn again or before.
Yeah, I had some part-time help. We had a small staff of part-time people, and like the day I got hurt, like I called some backup in the milk. Like I think I missed about a week of milking initially, between my father-in-law coming in to help, some other people pitching in just kind of keep it going. But then after that, I was back out there having to like make it happen. Mm-hmm. And we were also like really concerned too, because like if I was going to have a surgery, it looked like it was going to fall about the same time the baby was going to be born. So it was like major, and we were already really tired going in that year. The parlor project had exhausted us financially and emotionally. The growth had been great, but it'd been just like go, go, go for 4 years at that point, 5. Because really the year before we bought the farm was really, we were pushing hard, just get everything prepared, work the deals to get the farm. So even the year before we got the farm was really like a hustle year. So it really sucked the wind out of our sails. And we were kind of struggling with like, we had so much work that needed to be done. There was such a huge demand for our product, but we couldn't like even get close to satisfying it. We were burnt out emotionally, physically, just kind of like exhausted. And at that point in time, we started talking about like, yeah, the whole reason we got into this is because we wanted to farm. We wanted to be together as a couple. We didn't really want to do this direct marketing thing.
Doubt crept in again.
I don't know if it was doubt. It was just more of a frustration. Like, man, I was really thinking we'd be somewhere else right now, not like dealing with the problems we're dealing with right now. So we actually started giving the commodity market had kind of improved at that point in time, and started giving that market another hard look and thinking about like, well, what would it look like if we sold the raw milk business and kept the dairy and focused once again on more, just as we like to say, it'd be so nice to just wave at the milk as it goes down the driveway on a truck instead of, thinking about jugging it, and delivering it, and customers and sales and all this stuff. We'd kind of have our freedom back. So most people don't know this, but we actually actively shopped the herd share around at that point in time. We had a party that was showed significant interest in it
because it was a big enough business and income stream that definitely desirable for.
And we're thinking like,
how
man,
many families are you at this point?
1,700 ish, I think, somewhere around there. So we're thinking like, man, we could sell this. We'd be able to pay a pile of debt, make the transition to commodity, and we'd have less debt, less pressure, and we'd get back to what we want to do, which is farming. And so we actively shopped it around, had some serious conversations with a potential buyer. And then about the time we thought the deal was getting close to not necessarily being done, but getting really serious, they backed out. And it was a real realization for us. For like, okay, like Chris and I both felt like, okay, I think the Lord's made it really clear, like we're to stay in the raw milk business. So at that point in time, we had a couple choices. One, we need to shrink this thing back down to a mom and pop size. Two, we need to sell it, which we already discussed that one. Or three, we need to scale up so we can hire the people, try to have a more sustainable family life, and like try to meet this demand that we have in front of us. So the end of 2022 and all through this year, 2023, has been that scale up process. We have hiring people. We hired our first full-time employee in October of last year, so a year ago. We now have 7, I think. So it's been a rapid experience with that. We brought distribution in-house. That was unexpected, but when we sat down and went through our books and realized how much we were spending on distribution.
Which was what? How much?
If we hadn't changed the thing, we were going to spend like $300,000 this year alone on just distribution.
On getting milk to customers.
Yeah, getting milk to customers. Wow. So we're like, we could buy our own truck and hire in people and probably do it for like, maybe not half, but close to it.
Wow. Yeah.
And we would have control of the whole final process, which we hadn't distributed ourselves since early 2020. Like we had
since you were out of the cooler.
Yeah.
In the back of the car.
Yeah. Because before then we were using our pickup truck and ice coolers.
Yep. I remember that.
So we got back into distribution. Now we're working through the headaches and the pains of like, how do you manage employees? How do you set team culture? How do you impress your vision for the company? What you're trying to do with your customers on your team. How do you be a boss? I was terrible. One of the reasons we drug our heels so long hiring people is like, I never really had a great boss experience. Some of that was I was just pigheaded and that didn't always help the relationship, if I may be completely honest. But I was terrified of being a boss because I never really had like a great experience. And I was concerned about like, now I'm going to be that guy. So having to like step both feet into those waters. And then dealing with growth. We're going through a lot of growth, but it's outrageously expensive. And we talk about the flying thing, but like I haven't flown in like 6 weeks now because like, hey, we just don't have the money. Lessons aren't that expensive if you stretch it out over a period of time, but like we just haven't had the money for like flying.
Everything's going back into the business.
Everything's going back in the business. Like Kristen and I's salaries we get paid the least of all of our full-time people right now. And that's not like a martyr syndrome. It's just like we realized how precious cash is right now. And we're trying to like just push everything back into the business.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt with another question?
Yeah.
Just as it come to mind. You got into the business because you love farming. You had this thing for dairy that you just couldn't separate yourself from. That was your joy. I had a few people who have been mentors to me before we jumped into the baking thing say, Are you sure you want to do this full time? Because once money's tied to it, you're going to lose your enjoyment.
Yeah.
So if you could speak to that and where you're at with that, and then what that transition's like, and are you enjoying in that more managerial role, and are you still able to
do the things
farm?
I enjoy?
Are you still?
Yeah. So
where are you at with that?
The first answer to the question is, okay, if I was to do something else, what else would I do? And when I sit down and I really think about it, it'd be like, I'd probably want to do what I'm doing right now. So that kind of answers that question too.
You probably would do what you're doing.
Yeah. Like I'd want to farm. I'd want to, work with cattle and grow grass and like do the stuff I'm doing. So that kind of answers that question to a degree. I didn't realize this, like growing up, there wasn't any like signs that like, oh, Ben has a business mind. Like as a student, I was never an exceptional student. I never really showed, I was always kind of the kid with 1,000 ideas, but I never like showed like business chops. It wasn't until I got into business that I realized like, oh, I have like an entrepreneur's heart. Like I just love building and creating. So for the business side, I can get really excited very easily about lots of different ideas. So I'm enjoying the business end of it. The struggle is like with a dairy, like I mentioned before, you really got to keep an eye on the ball. So trying to like be involved enough with the farm that like I keep an eye on things, make sure we're meeting our standards, we're producing things the way we should be, and then still meeting my business requirements. I don't have that figured out. That's still pretty new. Still trying to figure out how to juggle those different balls. Like we've done a really, really good job of hiring some key managers for like the customer side, the distribution side, the creamery side. The farm is really, really tricky because it's just so technical and so experience based that I'm kind of still kind of the quote unquote farm manager. But that's something I'm realizing I'm going to have to probably make a change here in the not too distant future just for the farm's sake, because my attention's getting so divided elsewhere. And then also like we have 4 kids, trying to, be a little bit more present family wise. Like when Chris and I started the business, we realized like our oldest was 3 and when we moved to Middlebrook to buy the farm, James was 3 and Nate was 8 weeks old. So we realized like we have like a 3 to 4 year window where we could live like monks and do nothing, and our children will never remember any of this. We're not like damaging their lives. But that time
window
period
is closing.
That window closed probably 2 years ago, and like we're trying to like pivot as a family a little bit more to being a little bit more family based. But it's still hard because like we made habits of not doing that to like change those habits.
You mean like what would be an example of
like
that
going on
now?
vacation? We didn't go on vacation for like 2+ years. Like we tried multiple times, but like I've mentioned something would happen that would derail it and we'd end up staying.
Yeah, that's the thing about farming, that there's so many benefits to it as a lifestyle. So I will preface with that, but it is often romanticized, especially like with the homestead
highly romanticized
movement. Like people just have this idea, if I get these chickens and I'll milk this cow and it'll be the most idyllic. And it's like, in many ways it can be. I'm not saying it isn't, but then there's the other reality of like when you got 1,000 families relying on you for high quality raw milk and you don't have the resources to leave, like you just can't. You don't have the team to support it.
We joked sometimes that we were in our own self-made gulag.
I remember you would call me and be like, hey, I was thinking I might just come down to your place for a few hours just to kind of see somebody else's farm and hear about your problems. You'd come down for like the afternoon and just help me with something. That was like your vacation.
Yeah, I need to get away.
Yep.
So yeah, I think trying to find a healthy balance. Still have not figured that out. That's something we're trying to work towards. Like we need to figure out how to pay ourselves better, because like we do need to do, like all my cars are ancient and rust buckets, and like we're going to need to replace vehicles here soon. And like, so still trying to, we've been having a lot of conversations with our managers lately about like Cream Brook needs to grow up. Like we need to get out of this startup phase and start acting like an adult business. Like we need to start setting cash aside for long-term growth instead of just burning through it all the time for a little bit of this and a little bit of that, trying to make quick gains with growth. We needed to like actually have, like, we have time off built in for all of our employees, but like we need to build in some time off for Ben and Kristen. We're trying to act a little bit more like an adult business than like a teenage company, which could be a little bit like, boing, 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 boing.
Well, and I think you really have that like founder's mentality, if you will, of like, you're totally content to pay yourself what you need to live and pour everything into the business. It's almost like, on a crazy scale, like that's like what Amazon did. They weren't worried about Not that you're not profitable, because it is different in that sense, but they were, and what you're doing is like so pouring into all this infrastructure, because your vision for the business, if you're going to, like you were saying before, we're either scaling way back to mom and pop,
or we're scaling up,
or we're scaling way up. Yeah. And so you're not looking at per se this month, like, well, I didn't pay myself as much as I wanted to this month. You're looking at like, well, 5 years from now, if we keep investing back in the business with this crazy demand that we still can't seem to satiate with all of the production we're doing, then where you'll be then is exciting.
And Kristen and I both kind of have that mentality of like, well, when you die, you can't take any of it with you. So like, we don't have ambitions for a big house. Neither one of us can care less about cars. We just want them to get us from point A to point B. So I don't need something special. I don't need a Maserati or something. I mean, I would like to have a hot rod airplane one day. That's kind of like, if I had to pick like a vanity thing, it would be the 300 horsepower. That's
part of the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Bush plane.
More like 10-year probably. But yeah, I would like a 400 horsepower, like STOL capable, like, rip it and, kind of airplane. Like that's probably like my one vanity thing. Like we enjoy going to the lake, but I have no desire to own a lake house. Yeah. So to a degree, like our tastes are pretty simple. But it would be nice to just be like, hey, we want to go away for a couple of nights. We can do that. And this year with staff coming on, we have done more of that this year than we ever have before. And it's been really, really good for us. But we want to make it a little bit more of a habit, where right now it still feels a little bit like, if we can, we'll try to sneak away.
Let me ask you a question. This is sort of a aside. And I think with all of your years of experience in agriculture, I'll be very interested to hear your answer to this. But so obviously you're deep in the raw milk world and have a lot of experience there, but you've worked in other parts of certainly livestock-based agriculture.
Yeah.
What opportunities do you see right now in agriculture? Say somebody's interested in starting farming, or maybe already is running a farm and they're looking to try a new venture within their existing farm. What are some opportunities? If you had the time right now, what would you do?
Well, I would do exactly what I did, which was the first couple of years, we kind of skipped over that for the sake of time. But the first couple of years I was an apprentice and then farm manager. And then even when we first got married, we tried everything. Like I did rabbits, ducks, turkeys, chickens, pigs, both farrowing and finishing, a little bit of beef, dairy. Like I tried, because I didn't come from an agricultural background. I didn't know like what was my thing that got me excited. So we tried a lot of different stuff. And I kind of got a little bit of a rap against me earlier in my career, where it was like, well, Ben never sticks with anything, because he does something for like 6 months and then he's on to the other thing. But it was very much a kind of like a tasting process of like, what do I really like? What gets me excited? And I knew I loved working with cattle. And that's kind of where the dairy side kind of started coming in. So I think if you're completely brand new, my encouragement would be like, just try lots of things. And a blessing in disguise was, since I didn't have any money, we never threw a lot of money at anything. We just tested a lot, did a lot of little tests just to kind of see what we would like.
Yeah.
And that's where, for both of us, we found that like cattle and dairy and grazing were really like my core passions. Like, I joke that, when I get to heaven, that I hope I get my job back as a farmer.
I love that.
Yeah, I hope I can be a dairyman. It'd be fun to be a dairyman in a perfect scenario instead of one where you're always dealing with problems. But like, that's how excited I am about my industry, my field. That like, I would.
That's why I love getting milk from Cream Brook.
I would like to have my job back.
Well, that's really good advice, I think, because anybody that's thinking about starting farming, I think it's probably similar with baking. It's so tempting to go out and buy equipment, to go out and do all these, basically spend a bunch of money, or maybe even just take a big step, buy a big herd of cows, like when you really don't know what you're doing. And that's something that I know, looking at how we started farming too, pretty similarly, it was like by the skin of our teeth, by necessity, but we're fortunate in that we probably would have made just bigger mistakes if we had spent more money to do all that stuff in the beginning.
For better or worse, I keep all my spreadsheets and I'll dig through them from time to time and be like, oh yeah, this is the plan. If we had 100 grand for this and that, I look at 75% of the stuff I thought I needed, I actually didn't. But since I didn't have the money, I didn't spend it on that stuff. So I think when you're first starting off, you just don't know what you don't know. So you have to kind of allow yourself. And then that's the thing too, is like Kristen and I came from a family culture where like the worst thing you could do is apologize. And making mistakes, it's almost a little puritanical, where like making mistakes is a really bad thing. And I had to rewire my mind early married when I first started our business that like, number one, mistakes aren't fatal. And there can be fatal mistakes, don't get me wrong. But like, if I make a mistake on this thing, it's not like our business, we're going, that's the end of our business, it's the end of our relationship, the whole 9 yards. So we've had to embrace a little bit of mentality of like, we understand if we're going to be highly experimental, we have to be willing to have a high rate of failure. But we know, unfortunately, in farming, it's mostly experiential. And the only way you get that experience is by actually doing it and like trying different things. So like we're getting ready to try some pretty crazy stuff now, but like we've already looked at it like, okay, if this thing's a total failure, can we afford that failure? And that's now we're bigger and there's more people involved. I have to be a little bit more strategic with risks than I used to be. We still take a lot of crazy risks compared to what most people would probably feel comfortable with. But I look through the context of like, if this is 100% failure, will we survive it? And if it is, I'm usually going to go for it. Sometimes my managers and Kristen sometimes be like, hey, let's, can we think this through?
Can we minimize the risk?
I'm like, hey, let's go. Charge to my death again. So I think you just have to be willing with understand the fact there's going to be failure and to a degree become comfortable with it. You don't want it to become like sloppy and be like, well, like I talk to people when we hire them and bring them on, like, look, if you make a mistake and you put your best effort into it, your best foot forward, and it didn't work out, I'm not going to criticize you ever for that. Now, if there's a mistake because of negligence or like proper work wasn't put into it, we're going to have a different conversation. But like we live in a fallen, broken world. Not everything's going to go according to plan. And like, you can't sit there and be like, gosh, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. It didn't work out. And I mean, I have moments where I do that.
Yeah.
But
just no fruit in it.
But you just have to understand that like, there's going to be times and there's going to be things that you're going to try and they're just not going to work. And the sooner you're okay with that, the faster you'll be to move off a bad thing. Because if you have your ego wrapped up in it, we're like, I got to make this thing work. Then you might stick with a really bad idea that should have just been let go. And then realize like, hey, okay, if it works, lean into it really hard. And if it doesn't work, move off of it quickly and try something else.
Ben, as you look forward and talking about what does success look like for Cream Brook Farm, what are you shooting for? What's the vision? Kind of two parts. Is there a farm you look at and you're like, I know you're taking some trips to California, but that's where we want to be. Is something helping you chart your course and your vision? One, and then where are you aiming for right now?
Well, it's a complicated answer because I have 4 boys. I'm not going to pressure any of them into taking over the farm operation. Like I definitely did not follow my parents' plan for my life. So it'd be a little bit hypocritical for me to be like, hey, you boys are going to do.
You're all going to be farmers.
You're all going to be farmers. So I have very much a mentality of like, okay, we might be liquidating this in 30 years as far as like us personally getting out of it, or we might be passing on to a second generation. So I kind of try to keep both lanes open, if you want to put it that way. I think for Kristen and I, once again, it's that mentality, we can't take anything with us. So I'm not really like get too wrapped. I'm like, we need to be profitable. We need to make money. We need to buy stuff. Like we spend an ungodly amount of money as a business. So there's definitely a profit incentive to it. But I think for us, like we're just kind of blown away at the demand for raw milk right now. People who are really interested in their gut health, who are wanting to like, heal themselves from different things, whether it's eczema or supporting their immune system with, whatever thing they might be dealing with, or just moms who are trying to get their children up and going nutritionally. So we feel a real calling to kind of like be there to answer the call, because the raw milk industry is very unique in that it's a completely separate industry from the standard dairy industry. And because of that, we have to build all the infrastructure. I have to buy the farm, build a milking parlor, buy the trucks, put the distribution, build the creamery. Like we spend so much time and money on infrastructure, but like we're one of the few, if only, farms in Virginia that I'm aware of that are willing to like take our profits, put it back in to continue expansion, trying to reach more and more people. And I think when you start a business for intrinsically selfish reasons. They're good reasons, but they're like, well, I want to feed my family. I want to pay for my farm. I want to buy a car. I want to pay for my house. They're selfish. It's good, but they're intrinsically selfish. And what really hit Kristen and I here in the last 6 months is like, whoa. Like we're touching this many thousands of people every week with our milk. We're helping other folks buy their homes, pay for their dreams, put food on their table. Like Cream Brook now is way more than just Ben and Kristen. And I think it carries a little bit of burden that comes with that too, where it's like, we have a little bit of a responsibility outside of like what our selfish ambitions might be. Like it might be easy to be like, well, we're going to sell it all tomorrow and walk away. If we did that, like what would the effect be on all these other people that we now have a small piece of their life that we're responsible for? So I think that's really cool, but it's also really sobering. So I think the sky's kind of the limit on where we might take this. We got some pretty crazy ideas of how far that may be. I try not to say everything because my wife, well-meaning, would be like, took a lot to get this far. What's it going to take to go that far? And my wife's amazing. I love Kristen to death.
You're the gas pedal.
But I'm the gas.
Brakes.
She's the brake. It's a perfect fit for a relationship.
Yeah.
I'm the dreamer. She's the realist. But I think there's a lot of potential where we could take the business. Possibly maybe multiple farms involved. I think we're not even covering all the state yet. Like there's a lot of opportunity, but it's a challenge because like raw milk still isn't legal in Virginia yet. We have to do everything through herd shares. So there's that gray line of like, oh, do I want to build a multi-million-dollar business that's kind of hanging legally by a thread?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Explain real quick for us how a herd share works in Virginia. Cause I know that in each state, since pasteurization became a thing, like you said, back in the 1920s, 30s to clean up the milk industry. Each state regulates raw milk differently. Like in California, you can legally sell raw milk at a grocery store.
Yeah, so some
states,
in
Virginia, you can't do that. You can't sell raw milk at the grocery store.
It's interesting because some states never got rid of raw milk being legal, like California, Pennsylvania, I think Washington. Just a few states never actually completely banned it. And then there's been a big push in the last, I think there's been like 5 states that legalized it just this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a big push. I think 37 states, if I recall. I might not have my numbers correct. But anyway,
it's interesting because the benefit from a state perspective, I would think, to legalizing it is then they can heavily regulate it if they want to, like they regulate other
everything.
Milk.
Yeah.
So,
well, and we always joke that like now that marijuana is legalized, what's the argument for not legalizing raw milk? I mean, if we're letting that happen, why can't? But anyway, so each state is uniquely different in how they handle it. Virginia, and you guys know this from living in Virginia most of your life, is usually the state that's going to be the last state to do anything about anything important. So raw milk is kind of not really thought of from a political standpoint, because the herd shares are neither legal nor illegal. Like the Virginia Department of Agriculture is going to tell farmers, if you want to do this, you got to do a herd share. But there's no actual like code that says herd shares are like legal in Virginia.
But you've talked to the Virginia Department of VDA, and they said, if you're going to do it, do a herd share.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I joked with them and they agreed to it. That Virginia is kind of the don't ask, don't tell state. Like they know what's going on. They don't really want to know. And I'm not really exactly going to tell them exactly what I'm doing. And everybody seems okay with that for now. That'll probably change at some point. So a herd share, roughly how it works is like buying a stock in a company of like Google, Yahoo, or something like that. So you get a dividend in return for the amount of the company you own. And in this case, the dividend is milk. We don't get paid for selling milk. We actually get paid for the services rendered in producing the milk for the members.
So I have 4 herd shares.
Yes.
So weekly, I pay in to maintain the tail and the ear of my cows out there in the field. And that's my ownership stake, I like to think, a hoof or 2. Yeah. And then I get my 4 gallons of milk as dividend, not by purchase. I'm not purchasing the milk. It is simply a dividend in my share ownership in the herd. Because in Virginia, it's legal to drink milk from your own cow.
Yeah.
Well, it's just illegal to sell the milk like at a 7-Eleven.
It's like fireworks. You can possess them. You can't set them off.
Interesting.
What will change in your business if raw milk is legalized in Virginia? Will that be a good thing for you or bad thing?
Well, for the industry, I think it'd be amazing. And I'm fully supportive of legalization. I think for Cream Brook, it'd be a big pivot because we've built our model so strongly around the subscription style herd share type business. So we're having a lot of discussions now on how we're going to change the business the next 6 months to a year to put us in a good position so that when legalization does happen, we're in position to take advantage of that. Because right now, it wouldn't like necessarily harm a business, but it would be a massive overnight change if it like got legalized in like the next 3 months from how we've been doing our business.
Would you say, are you guys the largest raw milk herd share dairy in Virginia, do you think?
I've been told we're the largest herd share in the world.
Whoa.
I don't know if that's true. I really can care less.
Heard it here first, people. That's interesting.
I'm not I'm not here to be number one or two. I can kind of care less about the stats. It's just more about like our business and like.
Yeah, I was thinking if they legalize it, essentially who your competitors are.
Yeah.
And because right now you can only operate in the state of Virginia. That's one big thing.
Yeah.
Right. If they legalize it,
there's
then
a federal ban on the shipping of raw milk in between states. It's the only food product that has a federal ban that you cannot have interstate commerce between states.
What is that about? That is so
it's a
crazy.
long story. There was a massive raw milk dairy in California called Altadena. They were shipping raw milk all over the country. And the dairy board convinced President Reagan, who I have a ton of respect for, but obviously don't agree with this one, with President Reagan and Congress to sign this law in place, basically to put an end to Altadena's business. Now, Altadena continued to operate for a couple more decades in California, but it ended their ability to sell raw milk nationwide.
Ben, we're going to pivot to our final remaining minutes to just a kind of a lightning round of questions for you, because there's a ton of stuff we want to cover. Got to have you back on.
Thank you.
But just interested in your thoughts to a few questions. My first is, can you describe what it's like, pros and cons to doing business with your spouse?
Well, honestly, Chris and I don't know any different, because I had started Cream Brook the year we were dating. So while we were dating, we spent a lot of dates catching chickens and moving cows and cutting firewood. Our dates were,
poor girl.
They were definitely romantic, but they were usually surrounding some sort of practical aspect. So we knew going into marriage that like we were going to be in business together. So we kind of don't know anything different. And when we first got married, there was this conversation like, well, should Kristen go get a job? Like we were dirt poor. We could use the income. And we kind of intentionally made a decision of like, no, let's take that time and that energy and put it into our own business and learning how to work together and that kind of stuff, instead of her getting a job where we would get addicted to that income. And then when we want her to like stop working to work on the farm of the business, it's going to make this big adjustment. So we honestly don't know another way.
Awesome. Okay, I got one. What does your morning look like? Like, or even give us your daily routine. Day in the life of Ben.
So every day up by 4:50. Usually people start rolling in around 5:15. So I need to be out in the barn by 5:15. I like to have a few minutes when I wake up just to kind of like read the news. Or the Baltimore Orioles have been really good this year, so I enjoy like catching the highlights from the night before, because I usually sleep before the games start. So I'll check up on that, and then chores take us to like 7:38. And then from there, every day is different between either working on the farm, business stuff, working with a team. Usually grab a quick lunch around noon, and then we're milking again around 3. That's usually wrapped up by 5. Trying to finish the workday around 5 as much as I can, but usually it kind of goes in the evening. Excuse me, with other responsibilities, and that's the time where I'm not being interrupted by everybody. So I usually try to like brainstorm and do that kind of creative work during the evenings. But every day is very, very different.
Yeah.
Minus the fact we're milking every day at 5:15 and 3 o'clock.
A normal day is not a normal day on the farm.
No. And Sundays are kind of like a half day off to a degree. So, yeah.
All right. I have one. You're a courageous entrepreneur who I tremendously respect and get a lot of inspiration from.
Thank you.
What would you say to the person who is not like you, buddy, or me, a bit more risk tolerant, willing to throw themselves at their idea?
Yeah.
How do you encourage a cautious person? Can they do this entrepreneurial thing? Or is there some trait that they have to cultivate to get there?
I think because of my upbringing and lots of other experiences, I've had to be uncomfortable with discomfort. So to me, I can operate in discomfort to a high level, and it doesn't bug me as much as other people. I mean, I'm not immune to it. Like I definitely have moments where like I could be concerned about things. But I think you kind of almost have to take that Caesar Augustus mentality, and you're going to cross that Rubicon and you're going to burn that bridge and just revel in that moment a little bit. I know it could be really scary, but you kind of have to be all in. If you're not 100% all in, I don't care how much money you have behind you, how much experience you have, your chances of success are significantly reduced. So just burn the bridge, and you'll find out throughout your career you're going to burning a lot of bridges. Don't make them like relational bridges. Don't burn bridges with people.
I got you on the metaphor. Yeah.
But like from a financial business standpoint, you gotta just like walk around with a box of matches and be content with the fact that like you have to burn your lifeline every now and then.
Mm-hmm. No turning back. Yeah.
That's tremendous.
All of your questions are so much deeper than my questions. I have like 3 more that are just. I'm gonna ask.
You go.
All right, Ben. I'm excited to hear your take on this because we have different philosophies on equipment. What is your favorite tractor of all time?
My favorite tractor of all time is actually a tractor I still don't own.
Really?
Yes, it's a John Deere 4020, the best tractor John Deere ever made. I've wanted one my whole life. Still don't have one.
You've got a 60.
I have two 3010s, which are smaller versions of the 4020.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 4050. All my equipment is, I think my newest piece of tractor is like a 1984.
Mm-hmm.
So I buy
Classic.
I buy old steel tractors that they're built like tanks. They still need repairs and stuff like that. But I don't have a cab. I don't have air conditioning. Like I'm out in all of it. But once again, it's like I don't have tractors are an expense. They don't make you money. As much as I love tractors and I could probably own 30 of them if I had unlimited resources, I try to keep that expenditure account as low as possible.
Awesome.
What will happen first, the purchase of the plane or purchase of your dream tractor?
Well, I know which one's way more affordable, which is the tractor. Probably would be the tractor.
All right. My last question is, how are you establishing your company culture?
I think when we hire people, we're just being really intentional during the interview process. Like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what we're trying to create. We want a mission that everybody's working towards together. It's feeding and nourishing families in Virginia with the safest, cleanest, most nutritious product possible. It's about supporting your team members. It's about having a selfless attitude. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be neglected. We want people to feel like they're going to be taken care of. Financially and also, personally. But I think just having a team attitude and understanding that like Cream Brook is, it's greater than the sum of its parts. Not that like an employee is just a cog in the wheel, but just understanding like we're trying to do something bigger than just build a business to sell and go live on a yacht or something stupid like that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I shouldn't put it that way, but yeah,
no, that's okay.
That's my feelings on acquisitions. But anyway,
live on a 40/20.
Yeah, that'd be a rough life. But yeah, I think just kind of understand like we're trying to do something bigger than just make money. We have to make money. We're a business. We're not a 501c3, but like it's bigger than just the P&L.
Great.
Love that.
Ben, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was great being on, guys. This was fun. Man.
This has been an honor. You're really an inspiration to me in business, and I know to Daniel too. Mm-hmm. And we definitely need to have you back on to kind of go down different chase
avenues. The rabbit trails.
Yeah, exactly. That we kind of skimmed over. And I'm excited to have you back on as all these new possibilities that you're working on start to come to life. So
some fun stuff in the works.
Yeah, awesome.
Ben, you truly are the most remarkable and the best podcast guest we've ever had.
Because I'm the first one.
Thank you.
We'll see after next week, but
as
of today,
the ranking will fall rapidly.
Let you know how the ranking goes.
Thank you guys.